All right, here's the next stage in making our three-legged stool. We have cut this stool top close to round with a saw, like a hand saw. If you haven't seen that, look at the other video. And we're getting close to the line. You don't cross the line ever. You want to cut as close to the line as you can. And now we're going to refine that with a chisel and a mallet, a block plane, a spoke shave, and finally with our sequence of sandpaper, 80 grit. We've got 120 and 220. You could probably have some intermediate ones in here as well, but this will work great. So I'm going to get set up so you can see what I'm doing, and we're going to film this. Something critical about shaping this with hand tools is that and this is one of the purposes of doing this project, is learning about the way the wood grain responds to the wood and how you have to work with the wood. You can't force the wood to do things that it won't do, because it'll fight back. It's going to split and it will not work with you. You have to work with the wood. So if you look closely at your piece of wood, the wood grain here is going this direction. That's the way the tree was growing. Right here, the wood fibers are exiting out the end. And right here, they're running parallel to the edge here. That makes a huge difference in how you can shape this. You're going to be able to shape this board in 4 different ways. From the high point, I would call it, to the end grain in this direction and down this direction. If you have a cat or a dog at home, you know that when you pet it from the head to the tail. If you pet the cat from the tail to the head, it's going to turn around and swat your hand and scratch you because it's uncomfortable. Wood is kind of like that. The wood fibers are sticking out of the wood this way, just like hairs on the back of a cat. And if you run your hand along here, you'll feel it smooth one way and it'll catch the other way. You always want to be going in the smooth direction. And you can see it by looking at the wood grain to know which way you need to go. Imagine this is your cat. This is the head up here, and you're going down, and the fur is laying flat. And so if you're going the opposite direction, it's going to be catching. The worst, what will happen is if you're chiseling, you go to take the chisel and you're going to round this, and you're going with the chisel here, you're chiseling in this direction, the blade is going to catch, and it's going to split eventually right across here, and this whole piece is going to pop off. It's critical that you're going in the right direction. You're going from the spot where the wood grain is parallel to the edge of the circle, and you're working your way down towards where the end grain is. Once you go past that part where the end grain is coming out, you'll have to come from the other side. So there's 4 directions you'll have to come. You'll have to work from these 2 edges, which are the wood grain is parallel, and you have to work your way down to the end grain over here. If you don't do that, you're going to end up with big tear-outs, and you're going to end up with splits. So we're going to avoid that by learning the proper way. So we're going to start. I'm going to put the top, I'm going to call this the top of the circle. The wood grain is going this direction, so I want the part that's most parallel to the end to be in the vise. Now, I'll see if I can get close enough here. You can see this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a chisel. And I'm going to, just by hand, I'm pushing this and I'm tracking down to my line. Getting to my line. Okay, now here it's getting a little harder. As you get around the end grain, it gets a little bit more difficult to push. So I take my mallet now and I'm just tapping the end. And as I tap, I'm raising and lowering. I'm raising and lowering the handle to follow and track along that circle. If I don't do that, it won't go along the circle. All right. Now, if you look up here, you'll notice that I have just a small chunk here. I've cut an area. I haven't gone all the way across yet. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to work from one side to the other. The side with the line to the other side. Now be careful here. You want to try to keep this square across. If you chisel too hard on this side, you're going to end up with the edge of your stool won't be symmetrical, and you won't have a square edge that's square to the face. All right. It's a little bit rough. That's not bad. We're going to clean that up soon. So while I have it here, I'm going to work this direction. Let's go over here. Down to my line on this side first as my reference. Changing the angle of my chisel to ensure that I stay on the line. Make sure your tools are sharp. The chisel must be sharp. If you don't have a sharp chisel, this is going to be a very painful process. You'll notice it's it's pretty coarse here. I've got some pretty big cuts. Then you're going to go to a spoke shave, which is this tool, and you can begin to refine this. Now the spoke shave is adjustable, and you do adjust it by spinning these knobs here, and that lowers the blade through the base. Maybe a bit more. If you hold it at a bit of an angle, it seems to slice a little better. And here again, I'm at the top of the wood here. I'll switch and go the other way here now. So you can see on the side here, let's see, if I get a square, we'll see how I'm doing. You can always check to see how square you are going. So by eye, I can kind of see that I'm a little bit high here yet. It's not overly critical right here. It's perfect, but I think I'm going to be happy with that. Now let's do this part where we go over the end grain, because that gets more difficult. So let's take a look here closely, and you'll see the process now. So I want to be going in this direction still until I get to where the end grain is perpendicular to the circle. On this side over here, on this side here, I'm going to be coming this direction, and about here they're going to meet, and that's where you have to come from each side. Okay, now on the end grain it gets a little more challenging because it's harder to shear off those fibers, so you've got to take smaller bites, and that is not cutting very nicely. Let's go here, and you have to have a very sharp chisel. And that's tearing out there pretty bad. When you get right to the end grain, it is a challenge to keep using the chisel. I would suggest switching to the block plane, which is made for doing end grain like this. And you can see how if I use the block plane to slide over the end grain, it makes a much nicer cut. So you just set up the block plane and shave it down. if you've got a long ways to go here, like you have a big gap, 1/2 inch, get the saw and cut it closer. You want to be a little closer before you start shaving with a blade. But learn how the end grain responds to the blade. We're getting there. We're almost to the apex here. It's going pretty good. Maybe I should show this from the other direction. So you can see what's actually happening. Okay, I'm around the corner there now. The wood grain is here. Now this from this side, I'm going to go from here. All right. So I could switch. I'll be able to get there. That's pretty nice. So you can see here, I've gone over the end grain, and I switched to the block plane on the end. It worked much better. And here, now I'm going to continue. Here's my starting point. I'm going to go this way. The chisel. I use the chisel here because you can remove so much more material at a time. Once you get close to your line, then you start to refine it. That's turning out really nicely. Now I've gotten to the top here. I'm going to switch and now go down to this part. I'll put my line towards the camera. Now right here, I've got about 1/2 inch, maybe not quite, of end grain here. I'm going to cut that off to save some time here. That'll make that easier. So I get to my line first, and then begin to clean up the rest of the circle. And I've almost got it here, just a little bit to clean up here. It really doesn't take long. Maybe took me 10, 15 minutes. And I've learned lots about how the wood grain responds to the blade, and that's the whole point of this. Understand how the wood grain guides where and when and what you can do with your tools. There, that's pretty good. Bit rough right here where I tried coming over the end with a chisel. I can clean that up here with the smoke shave or the hand plane. No problem. Okay. That's that. Take a close look here. I'm a little ways off my circle or off my line. I'll bring that down to my line. Inspect it. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that, how that's turning out. Next thing you're going to do once you have it cleaned up nicely all around is we got a sharp edge here. We don't want the sharp edge on our stool. So we're going to round this over using the combination of tools that we have available to us here. Spoke shave, block plane, those will be the two main ones. To do this, I'm going to use a finger scribe. Finger scribing is something you want to learn how to do. You take your middle finger, put the fingerprint against the wood, and then with your index finger and your thumb, you pinch the pencil, and then you can move the pencil in and out until you get it where you want your line, and then you kind of lock it all together with your middle finger. You squeeze it down. At this point, you're just sliding your middle finger, and I'm rotating the piece of wood, and I'm sliding my middle finger around the board, and I get a consistent distance from the edge. So I'm going to keep my finger locked in the same place, and I'm going to give a line around the end as well. And this takes a bit of practice. If you're finding your fingernail is catching when you're doing this, that means you're just too steep. Your finger, you should be using the fingerprint of your finger. All right, so we're doing this around here, and then around this. But what this is doing is it's telling us how far we can go with our blade. So this is a little tricky, and it can be. You have to follow the same rules apply here. If you are wanting to round this edge over and make it not a sharp edge, you have to move the tool from the point that the grain is parallel to the end grain. You have to cut in that direction. If you go the other way, you're going to chip it out. And spoke shave or the block plane is probably your best bet for this. And what you're going to be doing is pushing the tool down from the high point to the end grain, and you're going to be changing the angle of your tool. Let's see. As you change the angle of your tool and slide it, you're going to be taking off more or less of the edge. As you're shaping with your tool, be it the block plane or the spoke shave, you don't want to cross that line. You want to come up to it, and you're just using your eye and you're feeling it out. It doesn't take long to do this. You want to go, and you're constantly changing the angle of your block plane. You're rounding over. You're also going to do the back side here. Now here I'm going to be pulling. Now right here, if you can see it, there's a little bit of tear out. And that happened because I pulled on past the apex of this parallel high point. From here over, it's going to be smooth. Now I would have to switch directions, so I went a little bit past and I got that tear out. Not really a big deal. I guess what probably works good is to go at 45 degrees. So here's flat, here's 90, 45 is halfway, to establish a bit of a chamfer, where it's just shaved off in this direction. And then, but you don't go all the way to your line yet. You leave a bit of a gap, and then you take off the, round it over to your line. It really doesn't take very long to do this. Here's what I mean by doing that 45. I'll try to get this lined up. So I'm going from here. I don't know if you can see how it's forming there. That's getting close to where I'm going to. Now, instead of holding it at 45, I don't want to go to my line, otherwise I won't get a rounded edge. Now I change the angle and just bring it over to my line. And I've got one more to do. That's nicely rounded over there. Okay. If you see take a close look. If there's areas that need some more shaping with the tool, here's a spot that I'm going to get a bit more with the spoke shave to get rid of some of the gouges left by the chisel. All right, I'd say that's ready to sand. Start with the red sandpaper. And you're working your way around the corners. And keep doing this until you sand all the edges nice. Once you've got them sanded with the 80 grit, switch to 120, and then 220 to make it buttery smooth. Now I'm getting close here, working my way around. And yes, it does take a bit of effort. What you're looking for is you want to get it to where you don't see any of the blade marks anymore. Clean that up really nice. Got a little nick right there. I'll be all right with that. And I've pretty well erased all of my marks, my pencil marks. Now to clean this up here, sometimes when you're sanding you'll have scratched the surface, because you really want to have your sandpaper going in the same direction as the wood grain. So after I've done the corners, I'm going to go and clean up the face. Try to go until you don't see your pencil marks anymore. Keep in mind this is still with 80 grit. Okay, I'm going to switch to my 120 grit. And it can fall apart on you. If you make a small rip into the center, you can fold it, and then fold it again, and you'll get a kind of stronger piece of sandpaper. Okay, so that's one. Finish sanding with 120. Keep doing that till you've sanded the whole thing. 120, and then switch to 220. Doing my final sanding here with 220. Should feel nice and smooth now.